Greetings, friends. I'm Galen, and welcome to the Gaming Adventure and Discovery Explorers.
A show about our adventures and discoveries as we explore the world of gaming. I'm Chad.
On today's show,
Updates, Mornheim, and Oozes. Let's explore.
Chad, that oozes sounded really sinister. I like that.
Oozes are so sinister, but
They
let's
are.
not get out of order too much.
Let's not. How you been, Chad?
Oh my god, I have done so much gaming.
Let's hit me
Which
with it.
I-
Lay it on me. I
I
have
had
done
all
none,
this-
so it's all you.
I had this pent-up demand. So we're recording this in, I don't even know, the 14th of July, and so this is about a month ago by now, a couple weeks ago. No, 2 weeks. I am lost in time and space. But
There you
anyway,
go.
so GoPlay Northwest is an event, a local in Seattle gaming event that is held at Seattle University, and I live very close to there. So I had a pretty busy schedule, so I just went for Friday, which was the first day of this convention.
Mm-hmm.
And first off, I just want to say, anybody's in the Seattle area who wants to game and is really keen on really a welcoming environment, really diverse, especially as far as LGBTQ and gender expression diverse and welcoming. And, you could pick your pronouns and put it on your name tag.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
Which I think is just like really cool, thoughtful
Yep.
things. They're definitely doing their best for a small convention, especially. I just want to really gets my highest recommendation in
Good
that
to
regard.
hear.
So
yeah.
yeah, and so I signed up for a couple games. It's also a good. It's very easy to just show up and sign up for games. They even have some kind of mechanisms in place, or you can just talk to people or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to sign up because I wanted to plan a little bit more, especially
Gotcha.
because it's been 10 years since I've been to this convention, so I also just wanted to know what I was getting into. So I chose first a playtest version of it's a game called Dreamland, and it's by Jason Bradley Thompson, who is an artist, mostly a visual artist. For example, he does those cartoonish maps of adventures, of like D&D adventures,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just really gorgeous. And he does a whole legion of other art around that. This is the setting is rooted in a series of H.P. Lovecraft stories about the Dreamland, which is a place that just is a world that only exists and is only accessible when people are sleeping. And so the role-playing game was pretty storytelling heavy. The mechanics were pretty light as far as I'm concerned. And you quickly generated your waking character, and then you generated your sleeping character, and the sleeping character was primarily the character who did things.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the mechanic was drawing specific words. So there was a kind of pile of words, and you drew them and narrated the story.
Okay.
And the game master really held it also. So there was a very concrete adventure that the game master was using.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was a lot of fun. It was a little. Being a D&D guy, I like my kind of concrete mechanics a little bit more, I think.
Yeah.
But it was worth my time for sure, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Good.
And the other game I played that day was in session 2, Pax Pamir, and it's by John Company, who's the same designer who created the board game Root from a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
People may have heard of Root because it was like the big game of I think 2018.
Yeah.
Or one of the big games that suddenly everybody has and everyone is playing. And I haven't played it. I don't know much about it. I've watched the Shut Up and Sit Down review of it, and they like it quite a lot. Those guys are pretty smart that way. But anyway, so Pax Pamir, we played it in about 2.5 hours, which was nice because it was kind of late. It was an 8 o'clock slot. So
yeah.
I don't get smarter as the night goes on. So I was
Gotcha.
happy. And it was just complex enough that there was a lot for me as a new player, completely walking in pretty cold
Mm-hmm.
to really try to wrap my mind around.
Yeah.
And so the setting, it's set in Afghanistan in the 19th century. And so
Okay.
it's after the collapse of the Durrani Empire. Now, I don't know much about this history, but the creator of the board game definitely does, which I adored. Like, this was a game created by someone who was educated and thoughtful and smart and wanted to make it also interesting and fun.
That's great. Yeah.
It's really vying for power between the tribes who were there and then the colonial, the Soviet Union and, well, they weren't the Soviet Union yet. So the Russians and England.
Okay.
Each player is making alliances with those three major powers all throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
It was just great. Like I said, it was just really a cool, different kind of game that I hadn't seen.
Yeah.
And like I said, games like this, I think I'm always a little worried that they're not going to treat the subject respectfully.
Right.
But this was great. Like, this was exactly how it should be done. So really a high recommendation for that game. Even though I don't think it's in normal retail release. It was a Kickstarter game. And I, at a glance, it looks like it might not be available very widely. But anyway, if you get a chance, recommend to play it. I think you'd like it, Galen.
Awesome. Yeah.
Most recently, I was at Critical Northwest, which is the Washington State Burning Man event. Instead of having to go to the desert, we just go out to a wooded resort area with running water and porta potties everywhere.
There you go.
And drove our cars, and it was great. But anyway, because you could drive your car there, you could bring a lot of stuff, and so a lot of us brought our games. And there are some buildings at the site. And a lot of people have big tents and whatever. So it's not a gaming event, but a lot of burners especially Northwest burners, are gamers. So a lot of people were playing D&D, which was different from years past. Like D&D is really, the ascension of D&D showed up here as well. Put it that way. So the game I played, it was in 2 parts. The DM was someone I didn't know. I just walked in pretty cold, but he's done it before. So he's an experienced game master, has gone to this event lots of times. And it was fun. It was a style that I am not used to. He did some things differently, which really made me reflect on what I like and what I don't like.
Yeah.
Which is another reason just to jump in and do it, just to play with strangers. And you just see that I did not care for. That I could use more of. Here's a way that was okay here, but maybe I could do it differently, that sort of stuff. So one of his challenges was that he was playing the structure of it. He called it a noir adventure, as in film noir inspired. People play D&D because they know D&D, and it's easy to get an audience to play D&D, but there was probably a better game for that objective. If someone did a modicum of research, they could find some of those games that are designed for investigations and designed for noir storytelling. And one thing he stopped, which I really appreciated, it's a warning for game masters when you're creating your voices for your non-player characters. He started with a fairly comical, talking hedgehog character that had a French accent. Played for laughs. Okay, that's fine. I was kind of neutral about it. But, also as the player of a DM, I'm on the DM side. So I'm with him. I'm okay, not my favorite thing, but he's in it. He's all in. Great.
Yep.
And then he did an Italian accent. I was okay, fine, whatever. But then, and he caught himself, but then he did a Japanese accent in a way that was clearly a Americanized kind of 1960s racist depiction, because that's kind of in the back of, you may experience this too, we're all about the same age when we were growing up in the 70s. A lot of the accents in media that were Japanese, air quoted Japanese accents, were really racist stereotypes.
Oh yeah.
And so he had accidentally slipped into that, and he heard himself doing it, and I saw him kind of processing in real time. And I was like, oh
yeah.
And then he said something about, I apologize if anyone's Asian. And I have every reason to think that this guy is on the side of the angels, but he made a mistake.
Yep.
And so, and then I was sitting next to him, and I said, just don't do that. And he did it one more time, and then he stopped. So I think he'd kind of painted himself in a corner is what it felt like.
Yeah.
And then he stopped. So anyway, I mostly tell that story not to pick on him. But to call out his mistake, but also just as a warning. There are other ways to make interesting voices that are not racist stereotypes, and when you catch yourself, stop and right. Think about it, and
that's great when people do that. When people do catch themselves, that self-awareness, right? They're always trying to improve. So that's great.
Yeah. And one little quick thing I think about when I'm making voices is to think of a very specific actor or character, and just try to sound like that. Like Christopher Walken, for example, has a very specific kind of tone and rhythm to his voice, and so it's very easy to kind of be inspired by that. And you won't. I mean, maybe some people like Matt Mercer, for example, professional voice actors might be able to actually sound like Christopher Walken. I'm not going to sound like Christopher Walken. So as long as I'm consistent, my players might or might not think Christopher Walken.
Totally,
through that. So. So there's other ways to make your NPCs' voices unique without going to the kind of the cheap accent. You know? So I mean, accents can work for sure, but and then I've also noticed I've become a little bit of a rules lawyer, Galen. Like
Chad.
I know. Like, because he had a few like 3rd edition leftover habits. And I didn't say anything for most of them, but there was a few where I'm like, that's not how that. That's not
how that works.
That's wrong. Like,
yeah.
And I kept my mouth shut mostly, but I was like, oh man, like it's. I tried very hard to use my powers for good because because it's helpful often to have someone who knows the rules.
Yeah.
But often it's not. So I just as my own self-reflection, I'm like, oh, I hope I came off good.
Yeah.
Like, and I wasn't trying to maximize myself, but it was my own sense of order.
I think it's great when just touch on that rules lawyer stuff a little bit.
Yeah, please.
For if you're playing in a group of people where a lot of people are new, or even some people are new, having that sort of they're trying to learn a new system, and when someone is getting things wrong, it can be really confusing for people.
And that's a funny line to tread because new people sometimes need a little bit of advice, like where's this number?
Yes.
A quick point to the box on their character sheet is usually very helpful and welcomed.
Yeah.
Especially if they're asking for it. Which is another, at this event, just like everywhere, consent is key. And this is
totally.
This is another place, just like your sexual activities or at the gaming table. Ask before you touch someone else's stuff. You know?
Yep. Exactly.
Ask before you intervene.
Exactly.
And if they've asked for your help, then you don't have to ask again because they've just asked for it.
Right.
They have invited you. So.
That's right. Well, great. That sounds like a whole bunch of gaming, Chad. That's awesome.
It was.
Good experiences,
It was great. So, but I do know for a fact that you did a little gaming since we talked last.
I did, yes.
Because I was there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had another session for our Mornheim Halcyon campaign.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Let's run through some of that. What we did. One of the things that I thought was interesting as a player and as a GM was the fact that we had a split party.
We did. We started with a split party. I forgot about that.
Because the session before, 2 of our players couldn't be there. So it was 3 players with 2 absent. And so we ran through and had our session. At the beginning of this last session, I was really interested to see how that was going to work. And I always find it interesting to see how DMs do that. Some DMs are just like, hand wave, the door opens, and there they are. Which is fine. It all depends on what you want to do. But I thought it was great the way we handled it. There was backstory with these characters. The 2 characters that were gone were included in a small little story of their own about one getting kidnapped and the other one saving them, and then going to try and find out where the rest of the party had gone and tracking us down, which I thought was great. It didn't take a lot of time. It was interesting for the other 2 characters that had been gone, and it was interesting for me as well, just to hear what was happening to the other characters.
That's one of those things where I think you don't want that to bog the game down. Like, you don't want a lot of players sitting on the sidelines while other players get too much screen time. It's a little bit is fine. You balance that. And so for me, it's all about being open to possibilities. And so these hooks had all kind of presented themselves along the way, and we just recently had the downtime that we talked about last episode. And there was just a few little nudges I needed to do to kind of work that in. And then it was really important to me to move it quickly.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to give them a story and to make it fun, but I would rather not do that and just have them with you guys quick.
Yeah.
So when I was just being open to the opportunity to do both. Yeah. For both and it worked. I thought I was glad to hear from your perspective that you agreed, but it seemed to work really well.
I think it was fun. So the party came together in this weird place where we didn't know where we were. We went through this weird magical portal that was this tapestry in this house that was a portal, and we all went through it, and we ended up in this place that we didn't know where it was, and there was no way back. The portal was like a one-way kind of deal, and we had a combat with some rats.
Rat swarms. Yep.
Yeah, and then there was the rats with the exposed brains. Which was kind of interesting. We didn't mess with them too much. They kind of went away, and we kind of left them there, a little detente there. So, and so we just sort of set about exploring this house.
And I want another quick little DM's like commentary about that.
Yeah.
So I thought about those. They're cranium rats, is what they're called. They're down there. Like, I'd already thought through that I wanted them to be living down there. And having them enter the scene was a little bit my way of nudging y'all along. Yeah. That's like, okay, you can sit and talk all you want, except people are going to come, and things are going to happen. And that's something I've learned recently is sometimes you just have to advance time or have things happen.
Yeah.
Just to stop the spinning or the decision making, or to make it just to elevate the threat a little bit. So.
Yeah. No, I thought it was great, and I saw that you were doing that, but that was totally fine because I think the party was a little spinning our wheels there. We're like trying to do a thing, and you're like, no, it's fine. Move along now. Nothing more to see here.
Yeah.
So
and I don't know if you guys noticed, but I've actually been rolling for wandering monsters now when you're in this dungeon. And that might have been a result from that. I'm not certain. I'm not going to spoil it for you, like what the rate is, but whenever like something happens, you do something that kind of keeps you in place, I roll. Or you talk too much, or when I get and then I roll, you know, and just and I'm really enjoying the random element in this game too. So
it's fun. So we set about exploring the house. We had a rogue in the party who did some searching for us. We ended up having a fight with a group of zombies, our first combat in this house. And exploring the house, we found out that as we looked out the windows, we couldn't see anything. And then we saw that there was like dirt out there. And throughout the entire exploration, we found that there was dirt piled up like almost to the very top of the house. So the house was kind of sunk into the ground, which is really kind of unnerving, especially for one of the party who's an Aarakocra who didn't like that at all, which I thought was great character-wise.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And another way to it kind of moved us along. He's like, I'd rather be up, so let's keep exploring up. And so we did. We kept going up into the house. There were more rooms full of zombies, but we found a room with the big baddie of this episode. There was a necromancer there with an apprentice, and I think there were 2 ghouls as well. Is that what they were? Yeah.
Yes. Yep, that's true.
And so the party engaged there. My character went down. The cleric,
it was pretty rough.
Went down. Yeah, it was a rough one.
Yeah.
People were noticing that they were low on hit points, and so they weren't wanting to mix into combat. And so it's one of those situations where you got to go all in or you're going to bleed to death.
And it's been unfortunate for y'all that you have gone down, been dying more often than anyone else, and you're the cleric.
Yes.
Men, your character is the cleric.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, jeez.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Geez, Luis, that's rough. I was a little worried for you guys there for a second.
Yeah, so was I. I won't lie. I was worried as well. But we prevailed. A potion of healing was administered to Mend, and he got back up, and we defeated the big bad there. Explored the rest of the house. There were some more zombies.
So there's one important note, though, of the apprentice.
Yes.
Like, never actually attacked anybody, but did release some monsters about halfway through the combat, 2/3 of the way through the combat. And then our Aarakocra character then killed him.
Yes. Yep. He sure did.
Yep.
And this apprentice was also a younger guy, right? He was like a teenager.
Yeah.
And
with the same last name as the family that you're searching for.
Yeah. So that happened.
Yes.
We didn't find any other evidence of anyone else, any of the family in the house. So
you did though. You did. We searched.
We found
maybe I'm revealing something that you didn't quite understand.
I think you're revealing. So we did find a room with zombies in it.
Yes, not in there. The room with the open window.
Oh, right. There was open window. There was a doll.
There was a blanket. The blanket and the doll. Yes.
A doll.
Yeah.
Right. But no actual people.
No people, and nothing. Yeah, nothing explicit.
Yeah. And that room with the bed and the blanket and the doll also had a door in it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
That led to the outside. So we decided to go ahead and try and find out where we were. We went out into this pitch darkness. We could hardly see our hands in front of our face. We used some light because none of us have dark vision.
Yeah, that's great.
And then we noticed that there were creatures coming for us, kind of shambling kind of creatures. So we retreated to the house. And to me, as a enjoyer of things pop culture, it really reminded me of Night of the Living Dead. Now we're stuck in this place and the dead know where we are and they're pounding on the doors.
Yeah.
And I think that's about where we left it.
Yeah, it was.
Is that correct? Yeah.
It was.
So,
and again, from a DM's commentary note, a lot of that battle took a lot of time.
Yes.
And so I was from a pacing perspective, I made a decision to really kind of move things along quickly. You know, I had decided what was in the house, and so you guys had made another search, and I very intentionally was like, okay, I want to get them out of the house. It's almost time to end the session.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it with, and you're searching the house, let's end the session. You know,
Right.
I wanted something a little better than that.
Yeah.
So I went quickly, faster than I probably would have otherwise, depending. You know, you always have to make a call with that as a DM. So, and those creatures that were after you were moving pretty quickly. So they weren't the zombie shuffle. They were maybe the remake of Dawn of the Living Dead, where they were
Okay. All right.
they're running. I don't know that they were sprinting that crazy, terrifying way. Or 28 Days Later is another great zombie, fast zombie movie. So, anyway, of note.
Yeah, but it was a great way to end the session as like that little cliffhanger. It was like, we're back in the house that we think we've explored all the way. What do we do now? It's good.
Yep.
It was good.
Yeah. And so with that, I think we can move along to our main topic.
Yes.
Oozes.
So I broached this topic to you, this idea of talking about monsters that we really like.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, yeah, that sounds a good idea. And I said, how about oozes? Yeah. Because I remember, like, one of my first experiences with D&D was a board game called Dungeon.
Yes.
And I remember
I've played that.
Yeah, I played it at a friend's house. It was a revelation to me. It's like, what's this? There are all these different things and monsters. And I remember there was a card that said black pudding on it. And I was like, what's that?
What the hell?
It was just so outside of any of my experience. It was wonderful. And it totally left a mark on me. And oozes like the black pudding and some others that we'll talk about shortly really left a mark on me. Are some of my favorites in the world of D&D. Yeah.
From my perspective, they are something I rarely think about. As a player, I've encountered them sometimes where they'll show up in an adventure and I'll include them because I don't dislike them. But I don't know. I don't think I've ever, I might be lying, but I don't think I've ever put one into a homebrew situation.
Yeah.
I've thought about it, but I haven't. And the last time I remember really thinking about the oozes, not the last time, but there was the Baldur's Gate adventure game. Video game. So not the computer game that is like the classic computer game, but there was like a Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, I think is what it was called. And so it was a fighting action game, and there was under Baldur's Gate in some of those sewers there were some sort of ooze. I think it was. I think maybe it might be a black pudding. I don't even remember, but they you'd attack them, and they would many more would splinter off and come after you. I just remember fighting those things over and over, and it was pretty fun, but it was a little scary.
Yeah, exactly. And I've only DM'd one thing, and that was my Curse of Strahd, and there was one black pudding in there.
Yeah, there was.
That I remember that totally screwed up your character's day.
Well, that was funny, and this is how player characters are, and we just did that a lot in that game where you're kind of solving yesterday's problems, or you're overreacting to the smallest thing. Yeah. Because I had a rapier. I think it was a normal rapier. It might have been silvered, which would have been silvered, a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was a big. We thought it was a big deal. It turned out not to matter at all. But we had fought werewolves. We couldn't fight them effectively. I couldn't because I didn't have a silvered weapon. Right. So then we bought a silvered weapon, and then the pudding damaged it. So it was doing. Sure did. I think it was 1 point of reduced damage, maybe 2 at the most. I'm pretty sure it was 1. Yeah. So I remember as a party we were really trying to take that seriously, and I was taking it seriously. We all were, but it was I kind of, but then we never fixed it. I never replaced it. I wound up using that sword all the way to the end. I think. Yeah. Or maybe in the Amber Temple we found something. I think I might have upgraded then, but it wasn't silver. It was just this fancy rapier.
Right.
I think that I found there because I really wanted to get a magic one, and I could not find any.
I kept it from you. I kept it from you.
Rapiers. That's right. I know, and I kept being like, I'm just looking for a magic rapier. I'm going to search this place until I don't know, Galen, if you noticed that I'm looking for a magic rapier, Dungeon Master.
And I gave you a fancy one.
And you were like, yeah, I know. You didn't ever say this, but it was clear that you understood, which is your prerogative. It was great. It was all good.
So, let's talk about the oozes. Let's talk about... because they've been around since forever. Initially, I'm going to talk about and read some stuff that Wizards put out for 5th edition, the recent stuff. So they talk about oozes, and the thing they have on every page on D&D Beyond for an ooze, it starts with something, a little section they call slow death. An ooze kills its prey slowly. Yeah, right? There's such varieties as black pudding and gelatinous cubes engulf creatures to prevent escape. The only upside of this torturous death is that a victim's comrades can come to the rescue before it's too late.
Yeah, it's pretty important.
It is. Since not every ooze digests every type of substance, some of them have coins, metal gear, bones, and other debris suspended within their quivering bodies. A slain ooze can be a rich source of treasure for its killers, which I think is great, right? Because that's playing right into the initial trope of D&D, the go to the thing and find the treasure. So there's actual treasure in the monster.
There's payoff for not just running away. There's a reason to not.
Then they say something about them being unwitting servants. Although an ooze lacks the intelligence to ally itself with other creatures, others that understand an ooze's need to feed might lure it into a location where it can be of use to them. Clever monsters keep oozes around to defend passageways or consume refuse. Likewise, an ooze can be enticed into a pit trap where its captors feed it often enough to prevent it from coming after them. Crafty creatures place torches and flaming braziers in strategic areas to dissuade an ooze from leaving a particular tunnel or room. So here they're giving you ideas for setting and how they can be used.
And some ways to make it so that it's not just a random dungeon generator.
Yes,
because these, I think one of the challenges of creating a dungeon is that the things have to coexist in that space. And an ooze that's just there is going to kill the goblins, wouldn't it? Unless these things are put in place. They're being clever to use fire, or maybe there's a wizard boss who's kind of made them all coexist in some way or something. So that's nice.
Putting them in an ecology in the dungeon. I love that.
Yeah. And you don't have to be overcomplicated. Just say, there's torches. Somebody put torches around. Who? I don't know. Whoever's intelligent.
Exactly.
As a DM, you don't even always have to explain. That's weird, huh? Yeah. You don't know.
You don't know as the players. Yeah, exactly.
Good luck. Good luck figuring that out.
Yeah.
Keep searching. Roll for wandering monsters.
That's right. So the last section they have, again, this is something that's on every one of the pages for the oozes. Spawn of Jubilex.
Oh, yes.
According to the Demonomicon of Iglewilv, pronunciation, I don't know, and other sources. Yeah, right. Oozes are scattered fragments or offspring of the demon lord Jubilex. Whether this is true or not, the Faceless Lord is one of the few beings that can control oozes and imbue them with a modicum of intelligence. Most of the time, oozes have no sense of tactics or self-preservation. They are direct and predictable, attacking and eating without cunning. Under the control of Jubilex, they exhibit glimmers of sentience and malevolent intent.
Oh, that's such a great hook. Because as a DM, it's easy to put the ooze in there, relatively, and just play it as is, and that's great. But taking it to that next level, you just add one boss ooze with essentially the same stats, only it's smart. Only it's
exactly
thoughtful and whatever, and that's your boss, even though it's the same. I love that.
Especially if you set up before, if they face oozes that are dumb, and then they come across one that acts differently than they thought.
Yes,
right. It can really throw players for a loop and be fun for that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about these 4 different oozes that they have.
Specific oozes. And so are these all under the ooze? If I was looking in my monster manual, which is not in the room that I'm in, is it if do I look up oozes?
Yes.
And these are all there?
Yes.
Okay,
these are not all of the oozes.
Okay.
They kind of put skins on a few of them, and they have different versions. And some of them can get size-wise, right? They get really big, up to gigantic. I think they go the full gamut. And then there are also some specific ones for some of the different adventures that Wizards has put out. As well.
That makes sense.
We're going to cover the black pudding, the gelatinous cube, the gray ooze, and the ochre jelly. Okay. And as I was looking at these things, I was kind of interested in their history, and I found out that they all appeared in the original Dungeons and Dragons set back in 1974. So these are bedrock monsters. They've been around forever, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
Starting with the black pudding, they describe a black pudding saying, a black pudding resembles a heaving mound of sticky black sludge. In dim passageways, the pudding appears to be little more than a blot of shadow. Flesh, wood, metal, and bone dissolve when the pudding ebbs over them. Stone remains behind, wiped clean. And that's kind of their little flavor text for the pudding.
Okay.
And I thought as we go through, I'll read the flavor text and we can kind of go over some of the powers they have that differentiate them.
And mention what the CR is. I know you're not comfortable with the CR rating, but the higher the CR, the more powerful they are. So include that.
So really quickly, the black pudding is an armor class of 7. It's pretty slow. It's got a 20-foot speed, 20-foot climb.
Okay.
It has its highest stat is strength with a 16. Its lowest stat is intelligence with a 1. So it's dumb.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this is where it gets interesting. Damage immunities. So these are the things that do not work at all. Acid, cold, lightning, and slashing.
Okay. Slashing.
Yeah. So your sword. Right?
But piercing is fine.
Piercing
and bludgeoning
is
fine.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I actually think that's some creative space that's not utilized well enough in 5th edition.
Agreed. Yeah.
Like, because there's quite a few monsters who are just immune to non-magic weapons, slash. But usually it's like non-magic, slashing, bludgeoning, and piercing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we're going to find as we go through these that a lot of them share some of the same kind of qualities. They also have this, the pudding has some condition immunities, which are fun to take into consideration too.
Yeah.
They're immune to being blinded, charmed, deafened, exhausted, frightened, and being knocked prone. I was like, oh, okay, that all kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
They have blind sight, so they can see in pitch dark out to 60 feet. They don't comprehend any kind of language, again, with that 1 int. And their challenge rating is 4. And going through some of its rules, they say it is amorphous. So the pudding can move through a space as narrow as 1 inch without squeezing. Right. That's the part in the rules I thought was interesting, is the without squeezing part.
Yes.
So it has it doesn't mind that at all.
No.
And it also has corrosive form. A creature which touches the pudding or hits it with a melee attack within 5 feet takes acid damage.
Yes.
And like you said, any non-magical weapon made of metal or wood that hits the pudding corrodes. It's a permanent cumulative penalty of 1. And if the penalty reaches 5, the weapon is destroyed.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Non-magical ammunition that hits, like arrows or anything like that, does the damage as normal, but then is destroyed. So there's no getting your arrow back after
you don't get
shoot.
half back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just thinking these are great complementary monsters, kind of like you had said earlier, where like you put these, I mean, they're fine by themselves, but also if you just, put them in a, I don't know, in a space down below something, and maybe a wizard or something, or some archers, up above, and like, pandemonium ensues.
Exactly. Yeah. This black pudding is slowly chasing you around this room that you're trying to find a way out of.
While you're getting, zapped by something else.
Exactly. Keeping with its corrosive spirit, the pudding can eat through 2-inch thick non-magical wood or metal in 1 round.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so it's pretty quick.
Fast.
Yeah, and then it has spider climb. So it can climb surfaces. Yeah. And on ceilings without needing to make an ability check. So
that's the worst.
That's the worst. Yeah, I know, right? So it can just drop on you from up top.
That's pretty good. That's cool.
For its attack, it just has a basic melee attack, 5 foot, does a little bit of damage, but then it also does that acid thing to any non-magical armor that's being worn.
Right.
So you don't want to get close to this thing at all. It just will just eat you up, literally.
Yeah, and that's great for those who love tactical combats. I think this would really add some great pizzazz to it. I could see like people who are really into theater of the mind that this might not pay off quite as well.
Yeah.
Or I guess maybe it would, but I don't know the way because I do like the tactics, and as a DM especially, I'm like, oh, that could really, the players would really handle this differently than orcs or kobolds or something.
Yeah. The theater of the mind stuff makes me think about how you'd want to increase this monster's idea of its threat. Like, it's just so disgusting and outside. It's so not human, yet it's coming for you kind of thing.
Yes, this could really work well for a horror, to add some horror elements to your game.
And so the last rule they have on here is under reactions, and it's called split. So when a pudding that is medium or larger, and a black pudding is large, a pudding that is medium or larger is subjected to lightning or slashing damage, it splits into 2 new puddings if each has at least 10 hit points. And it takes whatever hit points the pudding has when it splits, and it divides them between the 2.
Okay, yep.
So now you have, if you hit this large ooze and split it, now you have 2 oozes coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the tactical aspect of this, now you have more things to worry about.
Yeah, and that's fun because it changes the way the battle looks without... Well, do they still do the same damage?
They do.
Each split? Oh,
They
okay,
do.
so more damage output even though the hit points are reduced. So,
Yes.
So you're making progress, but more damage against you. Okay, that's a problem.
And
that's a problem.
New puddings are 1 size level smaller than the original.
Yeah, okay.
So they can go down to small.
That makes sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there, in a nutshell, is the black pudding. So let's move on to the gelatinous cube real quick.
Yes, I love the gelatinous cube.
The classic, right? I think this is the one that most people know about.
This is one of my favorite monsters, especially a favorite that I never use. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay, the gelatinous cube is a large creature, a large ooze, sorry. It's got AC 6, 84 hit points, and it's slower. This one, he moves at 15 feet.
Oh, wow, way slow. Yeah.
Its highest stat is its con at 20, which is really high. And its int is its lowest stat at a 1. And, this is keeping with what they said at the beginning, that oozes have no mind. They are totally instinctive. They don't reason. The cube also has some condition immunities, although it has no damage immunities. So it's immune to being blinded, charmed, deafened, exhausted, frightened, and prone, the same ones as the black pudding. It keeps the blind sight as well, but it's a challenge rating of 2. So it's a little lower than the black pudding.
I think some of the fun is that it's a reasonable creature for a low-level party to freak them out. To freak them out, but they can win.
So really quickly going over the rules for the cube, it says
There's some good stuff in here.
Takes up its entire space.
Yeah.
So other creatures can enter the space, but a creature that does is subjected to the engulf attack that the ooze has. So you're trying to dive through it, and you get stuck in it, and you're going to take damage. It's not going to be good times. I love the fact that creatures inside the cube can be seen, but they have total cover. So you're protected from outside effects while you're being eaten alive by acid.
That can help. I've been in battles where that matters.
And continue playing on that, a creature that's within 5 foot of the cube can take an action to pull a creature or object out of the cube. So that's a strength check. It's a DC 12 strength check to succeed.
Oh, that's not too bad.
And when you do it, when you make the attempt, success or failure, you take 3d6 acid damage.
Oh,
so there's
3d6 is a lot for
you
low
pay
level
for
party.
It really is. It really is. The cube has a limit. It can hold 1 large creature or up to 4 medium or small creatures in it at one time. So I'm just picturing it full of gnomes. I just love that idea. Yeah.
Or like a typical adventuring party is like 5 characters, so I can see the one lone survivor,
right? Exactly.
watching their friends.
There are decisions to be made by that one character. And now sort of the tricksy part of it. The gelatinous cube is transparent. So it says even when a cube is in plain sight, you have to make a successful DC 15 Wisdom Perception check to spot a cube that has neither moved nor attacked. A creature that tries to enter the cube space while unaware of the cube is surprised by the cube. So it's got that. If it's just sitting there, you may just walk right into it.
Totally. And I feel like as a DM, if you have not had a gelatinous cube engulf, be invisible and engulf a player character before they knew it was there, you haven't lived. It's like mandatory. It's a mandatory.
I agree.
I think it was in the 4th edition Monster Manual. They worded it as gelatinous cubes are invisible until seen, which it used to it amused me to more so that Kayakoni, who was a friend of the show, hated that, and he would always complain about that language, which cracked me up because I did get it. It wasn't the best writing, but it didn't bother me particularly. But he hated it. Hates it probably still.
I remember that. It's awesome. Okay, so the actions for the cube, it also has just a basic attack it can do like the Black Pudding does, just a little melee attack. But then it also has that engulf thing that they talked about earlier. So it says for engulf, the cube moves up to its speed, which is 15 feet. While doing so, it can enter large or smaller creatures' spaces. Whenever it does that, the creature must make a DC 12 Dex save. If they make the save, they get to choose which square they move to, adjacent to the cube. Mm-hmm. But if you fail, the cube enters that creature's space, and the creature takes 3d6 acid damage and is engulfed. The engulfed creature can't breathe, is restrained, and takes 6d6 acid damage at the start of each of the cube's turn.
It's big problems.
Yeah, and when the cube moves, the engulfed creature moves with it. A creature inside can make a strength check, DC 12, to escape. And if they succeed, again, they just pop out on a square next to the gelatinous cube.
Sure.
So, that engulf, right? That is, I know that we've both seen other characters, other party members engulfed by this thing.
Yes.
It's like you said, it really is an experience. It's fun.
It's great. And the joke that probably most of the viewers have heard is this is the only creature in Dungeons & Dragons that has evolved to fit a grid, the grid used in Dungeons & Dragons to evolve to match the game, which is very convenient. Yeah. And also very convenient because the little boxes that your dice come in will fit over your engulfed character.
Well.
It's perfect.
Exactly. And just to read their little flavor text on the cube, it says, gelatinous cubes scour dungeon passages in silent, predictable patterns, leaving perfectly clean paths in their wake. They consume living tissue while leaving bones and other materials undissolved. A gelatinous cube is all but transparent, making it hard to spot until it attacks. A cube that is well fed can be easier to spot, since its victim's bones, coins, and other objects can be seen suspended inside the creature.
That's great.
And I remember listening to, I can't remember which podcast it was an actual play podcast, and the party was in a dungeon, and they're looking down this corridor, and they saw this shape that they thought was a ghost. And so they kind of thinking, okay, it's a ghost. We're going to do this when we get to it.
We can talk to it,
and talk to it. And it ended up being, I think it was a wizard's robe trapped inside a gelatinous cube.
Oh, that's great.
And the gelatinous cube ate some of the party. It was good times.
Yeah. My best memory of the gelatinous cube, I think I've seen him in play maybe twice, was when we were playing 4th edition, and it was the Dungeon Crawl Classics module by Goodman Games, Dragora's Dungeon, which was originally made for 4th edition, and then it's been converted to Dungeon Crawl Classics since then. And as I remember, the party was crossing a narrow bridge over an inverted ziggurat, which as a DM, I did not know what a ziggurat was that day. Mm-hmm. I saw it on the map, and I'm like, well, I don't know what a ziggurat is. It's very confusing. But anyway, that's not the point. But I think the bridge collapsed, or there was wind, or something happened, or there was some flying creature that knocked somebody off or something.
Yeah.
And they fell, and someone fell, below, and instead of taking falling damage, which was bad enough for low level, first level characters, they landed in the gelatinous cube, which was invisible.
Man. Oh.
And hilarity ensued. So.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think I don't remember how you guys got out. I think and I think if you have a spellcaster or something, a wizard, you can.
Yeah, there are ways.
Burn it out or something. So.
And that's the thing about these creatures, right? When you unexpected circumstance, it demands creativity from your players. How are you going to do the thing? You got to figure it out. Yeah.
Yep. So in so many circumstances, if your character was alone, they would just be dead.
Oh yes,
that would be it. You're done.
It's good to have friends.
And it's a little rough to just have one player character when you're DMing, just because, you have to lighten up because it's tough. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what's the next next one?
Creature? Let's talk about the gray ooze.
Yeah, I don't know much about these guys.
The black pudding and the gelatinous cube are both large. The gray ooze is medium.
Okay.
And the little flavor text they give, it's not very much. I'll just read it out here. It says, a gray ooze is stone, turned to liquid by chaos. When it moves, it slithers like a liquid snake rising to strike. So I'm like, oh, okay. There's a lot of...
It's freaky.
There's a lot of... That really gets the wheels turning in my head about how to use this thing. It's got armor class 8, 22 hit points. Its speed, slower even than the gelatinous cube, 10 feet. 10-foot movement speed and a 10-foot climb speed. Its highest stat is a tie between strength and con at 16, and again its lowest would be int. It doesn't have any damage immunities, but it does have resistances.
Okay,
It is resistant to acid, cold, and fire. The condition immunities, it's the same as the black pudding and the gelatinous cube. It does have the blind sight again, 60 feet.
Right.
And it is challenge rating 1/2.
Oh.
So this is one that they say, go ahead and give the lower level party.
Maybe 5.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. And a lot of the rules for it are the same. It is amorphous, like the black pudding, so it can squeeze through that 1-inch opening without squeezing. It also corrodes metal, so it's that whole we hit it with a weapon, and the weapon is not magical, take damage. And it can also eat through 2 inches of non-magical metal in one round. It has one difference for it, sort of like the gelatinous cube, can just stay there in one place and not be seen. The gray ooze has something called false appearance. When the ooze remains motionless, it is indistinguishable from an oily pool or wet rock. So, it can't be seen. It's a rock.
It just is.
Yeah. So there's no detecting this thing.
Well, you can see it. It just looks like a rock. It's
exactly.
Just a rock.
Yeah.
Like, that's
it's
how
just
it looks.
a rock.
No illusion. Probably it just is transformed. It just is what it is. Except also something else.
Exactly. Just like all great things in D&D.
Yeah.
And its attack actions, it just has that basic melee weapon attack like the other two had, which can, like the black pudding, corrode armor. So it has that going for it as well.
Yeah.
And so that's the gray ooze, which is interesting to see how they kind of pare down the black pudding, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Baby black pudding kind of.
And this one doesn't have split, right? So if you hit it with a thing, it's not going to go into different sections. So, so that's a little different.
That's so great. Like, because this could be a great warm-up. You know, as you're adventuring, you run into some gray oozes, before the black pudding, is like the boss or something. Only, what? A boss? Like,
a boss?
This is pudding?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. It's not intuitive for me, which I appreciate.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, talking about our last one in this little section, the ochre jelly. The ochre jelly is a yellowish ooze that can slide under doors and through narrow cracks in pursuit of creatures to devour. That is all of the flavor text that they give you in this edition. So there's not much to it. It is going back up in size. It is large as well. Armor class of 8, 45 hit points, and a 10-foot speed and climb speed. Its highest stat is strength at 15, and its lowest stat is int at 2. So it is one smarter. It is the
twice
smartest.
as smart.
Exactly. Twice as smart as all these dumb oozes and jellies. It does have damage resistance. It is resistant to acid. It also has damage immunities. It is immune to lightning and slashing damage. And it shares the same condition immunities as the others, and also has blind sight, and comes in with a challenge rating of 2.
Yeah. Okay. One thing I like about these is that a lot of those things are very intuitive. Like, it has no face, it has no eyes, so it doesn't see. Like, so that's why it has blind sight. But it's not super powerful, so it's not like true sight or anything.
And I have to backtrack. The flavor text, there is a little bit more.
Oh, great.
Which is great because it's fun. It says, ochre jellies are yellowish blobs that can slide under doors and through narrow cracks in pursuit of creatures to devour. They have enough bestial cunning to avoid large groups of enemies. An ochre jelly follows at a safe distance as it pursues its meal. Its digestive enzymes dissolve flesh quickly, but have no effect on other substances such as bone, wood, and metal. So there you go. So it doesn't have that effect on your weapon as you hit it.
Okay.
And its other rules are the amorphous, so it can go through that 1-inch wide opening with no problem. And it also has that spider climb ability. So it can go up the wall and on the ceiling and wait for you there. It has the same kind of basic melee attack as the others. And it also has, going back to the black pudding, it also has the split reaction.
Oh,
so when you hit this one, it's also going to split.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go. Those are the 4: the black pudding, the gelatinous cube, the gray ooze, and the ochre jelly.
Nice. I'll add the fourth and a half of these things, which is the slimes.
Yes.
Which in some of the previous editions, and I don't have it all in front of me, but I know in first edition AD&D, for example, they were in the monster manual. I'm reasonably sure of that. But since then, in 5th edition, they are now in the Dungeon Master's Guide as a hazard rather than a monster. Because,
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the idea is that they are like more plant than beast.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because they grow, like the slime in not your kitchen, of course, but in one's kitchen.
Yes.
And that they're not really sentient. They're more like a Venus flytrap that just responds, kind of really responds to stimulus. This is on my mind because, we several months ago ran the original version of The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh.
Right.
And the reason I had chosen that, this was even before it was announced that they were going to be rebooting that in Ghosts of Saltmarsh. And I had chosen that because I played that in its original form back when I was a teenager, and I was the player. And I was running like a bunch of characters. In the original version, I don't know what they did. I haven't looked at the new one yet, but there's a green slime in there that drops on you, on your party. Like you enter the room and it just drops on you. Like forever, definitely that day, and it's always been lingering. I look at the ceiling. Is there a slime there? And there's never been another slime since that very first one. But it's just, I was like, oh my gosh, this is totally unfair. This game is unfair.
Yeah, it's right.
It's baloney. Turned out, yes, but
in the best possible way.
In the best possible way, yeah. I didn't quite have the trust in my DM yet. And it wasn't his fault. He was just like, I didn't know. I had to learn about what D&D was really about.
Exactly.
My other reflections on all this, so many of these appear in the Out of the Abyss adventure.
Yeah.
And it was in the first half. There's a whole city, I don't remember the details, but it's a city that's essentially occupied by these oozes, and there's an ooze king. That's not his name. He has a better name than that. Pudding King. He was the Pudding King.
Awesome.
Yeah, and he's developed this entire cult, and I had to read through it when we were playing because it's a location, and as you were traveling through the Underdark, you could have traveled there and encountered that. So I had skimmed through it just to kind of get a sense. In that adventure, as you know, and is that there are the demon lords in the Underdark. So Jubilex was down there, and Zogtamoy, was down there, and they were interacting with each other.
Yeah.
And Jubilex's presence had made these oozes particularly sentient and troublesome. So it looked pretty fun.
Yeah.
You guys were too high level, really, for that. And I had other kind of things in that adventure that I was more interested in, but it looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
So those of you who are really interested and want to kind of see something to do with oozes, and I might do this too, I would recommend looking there first. And so I thought it might be fun to think of ways to integrate oozes into a campaign or into an adventure.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that you kept mentioning, maybe you didn't say it explicitly, but I was reacting with this horror as... imagine your hand burning off because this pudding has dropped on it. Or, imagine really what would happen if you were walking down a hallway and suddenly your friend who was 2 steps ahead of you, was sucked into this wall of goo. And then watching your best friend dissolve into nothingness. Horrifying. Yes.
It reminds me of, because you said horror, it reminds me of the movie The Blob, right?
Yes.
It's a horror movie, and I think that kind of reaction is totally natural.
Yeah, because these things are not understandable. They don't. Part of the one intelligence makes it sound like it's a weakness, but really it's just their nature.
Yeah.
It's just so not real.
Yeah, you cannot reason with it.
No, not at all. So one thing that I like to do is to take two completely disparate ideas and then find a way to make them go together. And so I thought that might be a way to kind of frame this. So and actually I would recommend doing this to anyone out there who is faced with a challenge of creativity. Just take two even random things or roll on a table twice and then make it work. And then, force yourself to be creative with that. And so we had already touched on that part of the Out of the Abyss where there was essentially a cult of oozes. There was a whole society built up around these oozes. So that could essentially have been, to backwards engineer it, if you take a cult and you take oozes and put them together, and put maybe you pull in the sentience that we had talked about, about with was it the black pudding or all the oozes, that some of them are sentient occasionally.
Yes.
And then you have a cult. It's very different from, like the death cults, for example, that I'm using in my Mornheim adventure. So anyway, maybe we could think through. So we're starting with oozes as a starting point. Now think of some other disparate features that we might want to use to make maybe a short adventure. Maybe we start as a short adventure, see what it looks like, and see what happens.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so the thing that strikes me about oozes, just looking at their stat block, is that really tiny int. That really small, that one there that really stands out. So I was thinking, what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is something that's really intelligent. And who is that? It's wizards. Wizards always have really high int.
If you go even further, like a lich would be like uber, if you want to go crazy. So I know I interrupted you. Did you finish your?
No, let's do it. Let's
okay.
Oozes and liches, or ooze and lich. Yeah.
Because these are probably, especially if you like the gelatinous cube, in my mind, and the lich or the demi-lich are like the two most disparate things I can think of, in this environment. So that's perfect.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And undead, right? So maybe we think through. So we've talked a lot about oozes. They're immune to lightning. They're immune to slashing mostly.
Yep.
Some of them separate. We think about liches. What are the first things that come to your mind as far as primary elements in liches? What makes a lich a lich?
The first one would be the phylactery.
Oh, that's great.
Which I think are both our minds are spinning on that one. How we combine.
And so, and just to summarize, to make explicit, so the phylactery, make sure I'm getting this right too, is like isn't it like the essence of their soul or something, of the lich's soul? And if you can't find and destroy it, no matter how many times you kill it, it will return.
Yep.
And so we saw a version of that in Voldemort and Harry Potter. He kind of had like 7 phylacteries, and so they had to find them all on their quest.
Right.
I don't know they didn't use that word, but it's the same plot point.
It was essentially a phylactery. Yeah.
Cool. And I think of the undeadness and the wizardry with a lich. Because they are like even above vampires in my mind. The king of the undead world in Dungeons and Dragons is the lich. And but in a thoughtful way, because you have to plan, and you become a lich through pure intent and will and study and action.
Right.
Not by accident.
No.
Which is unlike like a vampire. You could become a vampire just by being prey. Another vampire's prey.
Exactly.
Or something.
Yeah, the wizard makes that choice. It's like, this sounds great to me.
Yeah.
I love all of this. Yeah.
So if we're thinking in terms of an adventure, so maybe we would start with some encounters with oozes that are relatively mundane, but we could flavor them up a little bit. I'm not quite sure how, but I'm thinking first level. I don't know, what level should we? No, I should ask you. We should decide this. It doesn't have to start at first level.
Let's start it. Let's start at first level. Why not?
Okay.
Because when we talked about the lich and the phylactery and the undeadness of it, I got a picture flashed in my mind of a skeleton inside a gelatinous cube.
Oh, man. Oh, yes.
My idea was like maybe it's piloting it. They're like the lich is controlling the skeleton and imbuing the cube with a little more intelligence. So it's just like directing it in a certain way or something like that. But it'd be easy enough to incorporate a skeleton inside one of these oozes or the pudding or something like that, and just have it be just be a skeleton.
Yep.
It's like, oh, there was someone here, and it's wrapped up in this black stuff.
Totally.
Oh no, what's happening?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, even in the most mundane way of adding those two things together, you fight your gelatinous cube, and then it dies. You win.
Oh, yes.
The skeleton gets up and attacks you.
Yes, I
like,
love
that's
that.
a fun encounter.
I think that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it doesn't add a lot. Skeletons are pretty weak, so for first level, second, maybe even third level, that could be a fun, like, add some terrain or something. Like, that's some fun. That's fun.
And just that shock, right? It's like, and the skeleton gets up. Like, what? No, we finished the encounter. We're done. It's like, no.
Totally. And I have found with those sorts of things, you have to be a little careful. It's better in 5th edition, and it's better if you kind of, as a DM, run things quickly. It can be a little like, oh my God, really? We have to keep fighting? Like, we have to keep, like, the combat, and, players especially who are really keen on the exploration and role-playing. And if it's gone a long time, and now you just doubled the combat, you want to watch for that. Now, if you're running your combats fast and, rolling it along and read the group, that's also something you could just decide on in the moment. Like, you could, if the combat's fun and they're, like, into it, or it's too easy, make that skeleton get up and fight them.
I was even thinking that even if you wanted to throw it in, but you'd think maybe the party doesn't want to have another combat right away, but you really want the skeleton in there, just flavor text it. Have the skeleton get up, and before someone knows it, they're on top of them, but then it, like, falls apart.
It just collapses.
I love
that.
Like, it's got nothing left. But then they still have that in their heads. That this is, whoa, wait a minute, what?
You move the story forward in a way that was very subtle.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of another option, that if there's nothing saying the skeleton had to animate right away. So the skeleton could just collapse or fall out of the cube and look like a normal skeleton. And then if they're searching the room and talking and maybe something else happens, and then if sometimes my sessions go the other way and I'm like, oh my God, we have got to do some fighting. Then the skeleton gets up. Or if they screw around too long, like we were talking about earlier, make that skeleton then get up and just to juice things up.
Yeah. I also had another idea just popped into my head for a different encounter. I was thinking about that the power that some of the oozes have to squeeze into spaces, right?
Yes.
So what if maybe it's kind of like a hermit crab? An ooze has gone into a skeleton or a corpse of some kind and is moving it around. Like, it could be crawling on the ground. You see a skeleton crawling on the ground, but it's the ooze inside of it. Like that. It's just a different flavor. It's still an ooze, but it's got a little different flavor to it, maybe.
Yeah. Man, when you were talking, you just gave me this flash, which I think would really kind of be the structure for this adventure. So, relatively short adventure, but set in an enormous sarcophagus. Not a sarcophagus, a crypt. A crypt with both sarcophagus and just burial platforms and maybe remains, urns. Like, what when you'd mentioned that they squeeze, you could have urns all around you.
Oh, yes.
Only they're filled with puddings or something.
Yeah.
And then so suddenly, when you walk in with your light or something, like one comes out and another comes out and they start to pop, all around you, and how terrifying that would be.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh my God. And then maybe the skeletons just get up in a very normal way, and maybe zombies get up in a very normal way, or then you could add in your, or maybe you do that. I would do that skeleton gelatinous cube first. Yeah. Maybe, and then you find the crypt, and then you realize that the crypt is infested with oozes of some sort.
And you could even use that encounter, if you wanted to, playing on the fact that these things are also really slow.
Yes.
That it becomes like a time element now. They've awakened these things and they're coming.
Yes.
But the party's faster, so they can get away, but they have to hurry up and complete their task before this horrible army of oozes finds them or something like that.
Yes. So what I'm seeing is maybe the quest is for the phylactery, and And so they go in. It's a low-level party, so you can't really get directly engaged with the Lich. Though you could in a non-combat way, but maybe that's more complicated than this for a short adventure. And so they have to go in and find the phylactery of a Lich. So it turns out to be in this dungeon, in the crypt, just like we talked about.
Yep.
And, remember, it's one of the great things about Skyrim dungeons, where all of them had this, like, shortcut at the end to get back out again. So you go in, you find the thing, and then there's a short little passage that gets you out. So,
yes.
But you don't tell them that, right? And so they're running deeper. All these oozes are, like, following them, They're like, how are we gonna? We got to fight our way out of here. What's gonna happen? This sense of panic, maybe. And then and I think we need to figure out the boss. And then once they, solve it, fight the boss, then they find a way to kind of sneak out, maybe through a forgotten little stairwell or something, to get back to the surface.
Yeah. So when I mentioned phylactery earlier, the first idea I had was maybe the phylactery is inside a gelatinous cube.
Oh, yeah, nice. Okay, great.
And then I remembered, as I was poking through D&D Beyond and looking at the other versions of these cubes, they have a gelatinous cube variant. It's still only challenge rating 2, but it's gargantuan sized.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
great.
It's like it is a room, right?
Yes.
It's just huge. It's something out of the ordinary from what the party has faced before. So maybe there's a way to work in that size variant.
Oh. Yeah, well, there's a lot. I mean, there is that. I think it's the skeleton has an ogre-sized skeleton. So our skeleton idea would work there also. Or something else. Like, most of the undead are pretty small. I mean, not small, but medium-sized. Most undead, I think, that I can think of are medium-sized because they're undead humanoids.
Oh, how about this? What if there's the skull of a giant?
Oh, great.
Inside that cube.
Oh, God. Yeah. Just from a pure fantastic location, like idea, they would freak out.
Yes.
Especially if they knew a lich was like behind it.
Yeah.
And now they see this like skull there. And then, especially if the last time they fought a gelatinous cube, the thing animated.
Yeah, right.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, and then you could reskin it and make it a flaming skull.
Oh,
so you
yes.
could, like, only with a different size. And I haven't looked at those lately, but I think they're small or tiny even. I'm not sure.
Yes.
And they fly around. So then you could make this giant, this big gymnasium sized, whatever.
I love it.
And this flaming skull comes around that they have to fight.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not any more powerful. It's just bigger.
Yeah.
And or maybe you juice it up a little bit and add something. I don't know.
Sure.
And add some other kind of fun things.
Oh, man.
Including some of those oozes, it could be quite a fun battle. So that's flying around while the other oozes, we talked about that before, where the puddings and stuff are down below.
Yes.
Kind of for them to step on or not step on or whatever. And
yep. They look down somewhere and it's like, oh, the floor is moving. Oh,
yeah.
Don't go down there.
Yeah. Oh, man, even better if, like, one of the party fell. They didn't see it move until one of the party fell into it, and now they're moving as they're, like, suffering the acid damage.
Yeah.
And that'd be a good little adventure, I think. Nice
it would
dungeon,
be. I think that's a little one-shot. Totally.
Yeah. One or two. Like, dungeons can take a while. So that's
true.
That's true. You could buff it out. It could be one shot, or you could buff it out to make that dungeon more complicated or add some NPCs in there, a lot of ways. Or not, right? If you one shot and you get them rolling.
If the party is really into it, maybe extend it. If the party's like, this isn't my favorite thing, and you just one-shot it. It's a thing. It's an experience that they had.
Or like a convention game, those where you just know you just got 4 hours and go for it. That would be cool.
I want to run this.
Okay, well, you can have that idea.
Yeah, awesome. It's mine.
Yeah, I might still use it. Next time we'll do a Mornheim-centered one. All right, everybody. So if you are watching this on YouTube, go ahead and click the like button if you liked it and consider subscribing to the channel. If you are listening on our podcast, Gaming Adventure and Discovery Explorers, the best thing you can do is tell everyone about how much you like the show and subscribe if you're on iTunes, and we like those 5-star reviews as well. If you'd like to reach me, the best way is through Twitter, at ContClockwise, short for Continuing Clockwise, spelled ContClockwise. Galen, how can people interact with you?
Again, the best way would be on Twitter. You can find me at Zobamie, Zobmie. And if you're watching this as a video on demand here on Twitch and you like what you see, you go ahead and hit that follow button up top. You get notifications when I go live on a stream. I always do those notifications when we do these recordings as well. And so if you're listening to this on a podcast or YouTube or whatnot, go ahead and hit us up at either one of those Twitter locations if you have questions or maybe topics you'd like us to talk about. We're always up for that sort of thing. Yeah, so until next time, folks, take care of yourselves.
And game great. Oozes.